Hi, welcome back to Joe Blogs. In today's episode, I want to talk to you about what's happening in the global economy and specifically to talk about the ongoing risk of some sort of global conflict, which would obviously have a devastating impact on the global economy. And of course, a lot of this is revolving around what's going on with Russia. Now, the United Nations has an annual meeting. There are 193 countries that are members of the United Nations, and Russia is one of those. And interestingly, within the United Nations, there's what's called the Security Council. And the Security Council is a group of 15 countries that are in charge of making sure there is peace and order in the world. And within those 15 countries, there are 5 permanent members, the founding members. And they are the United States, the United Kingdom, France, China, and Russia. Well, Russia wasn't obviously a founding member because it didn't exist in 1945 when the UN was put together. It was the Soviet Union back then. But Russia inherited the Soviet Union's seat after the breakup of the Soviet Union in 1991. And there's a lot of countries that are now unhappy that Russia has one of the prominent roles in the Security Council because obviously with the ongoing war in Ukraine and all of the other things that are going on with Russia right now, they don't seem to be acting as one of the world's peacekeepers. So Sergei Lavrov, who's the Foreign Minister for Russia, spoke at the recent United Nations General Assembly. And this is what he said about the ongoing war in Ukraine.
Russia's security and its vital interests must be reliably guaranteed. The rights of Russians and Russian-speaking people in the territories that remain under the control of the Kiev regime must be restored in full. On this basis, we are ready to discuss security guarantees for Ukraine. So far, neither Kiev nor its European sponsors seem to realize the gravity of the situation or to be willing to negotiate honestly. The North Atlantic Alliance continues to expand right up to our borders, contrary to assurances given to Soviet leaders to advance not a single inch to the east.
So he's made a couple of interesting points there. The first is referring to the Russian-speaking citizens that were previously under Kiev's control. So essentially what he's saying is that the people within the areas that Russia has invaded are basically Russians, and so they've been liberating them from the previous regime that they were having to live under Ukrainian law. Well, that's an issue, I think, for other people to debate. I don't want to get into that right now, but that's the justification for the ongoing war. There's no issue with regards to him saying that he's invaded Ukraine. He's actually saying he's liberated these Russian people. So that was Russia's position. But he then went on to talk about NATO and the fact that NATO is trying to come onto Russia's borders. And this is a point that Russia has been pushing back upon. It doesn't want Ukraine to be allowed into NATO, nor does it want any other countries that are around Russia. But interestingly, he then went on to talk about what Russia's response will be if there's any aggression against Russia.
Threats of the use of force against Russia are increasingly being made. Russia is being accused of almost planning to attack the North Atlantic Alliance and the European Union countries. President Putin has repeatedly debunked these provocations. Russia has never had and does not have any such intentions. However, any aggression against my country will be met with a decisive response. There should be no doubt about this among those in NATO and the EU who not only are telling their voters that war with Russia is inevitable and are forcing them to tighten their belts, but are also openly talking about preparations for an attack on our Kaliningrad Oblast and other Russian territories.
So he's made a number of interesting points there. Firstly, he's referring to President Putin and saying that other countries are potentially preparing to attack Russia. Well, I don't think anybody is intending to attack Russia as it stands at the moment. There hasn't been any evidence of that. But they're saying that if that does happen, if there is any provocation against Russia, it will be met with decisive force. And they then went on to talk about the fact that countries are now talking about potentially having a full-on war with Russia. Now, just before we go on any further today, can I ask anybody that hasn't subscribed yet to please hit that subscribe button? And if you'd like to win this Is that you? Then please have a look in the link below, because this competition is closing on the 30th of September. So in terms of getting to the bottom of all of this, let's have a look at what's actually been happening with regards to Russia and NATO's borders recently.
Earlier this month, as many as 23 Russian drones entered Polish airspace. 4 were shot down by NATO forces, sparking urgent NATO defence meetings. Then last week, 3 Russian fighter jets entered Estonian airspace for 12 minutes, forcing NATO to scramble its own jets. Video emerged of a suspected Russian drone forcing the closure of a Danish airport. Other drones have been detected near Danish military bases in recent days.
So quite a lot going on there. And I don't think Russia is accidentally breaching NATO's airspace. That's not the sort of thing that can happen. Maybe if one drone inadvertently went off track and went into Polish airspace, then you could explain that possibly by some sort of malfunction. But when you've got multiple drones, more than 20, and you've got aircraft that are manned by pilots who obviously are very skilled in terms of where they're flying, and it was reported that the transponders on those aircraft were switched off whilst they were in NATO airspace, I don't think you can explain that as just being a mistake. So Russia has said that it will take decisive action if any action is taken against Russian military equipment. So let's hear what the leaders of NATO are saying in response to this.
This situation brings us the closest we have been to open conflict since World War II. We have a full-scale war beyond our Ukrainian-Russian border, but we already have something that goes beyond the bounds of mere provocations in our own skies.
The US president told NATO Russian jets violating its airspace should be shot down.
Do you think that NATO countries should shoot down Russian aircraft if they enter their airspace?
Yes, I do.
To President Putin, I say, your reckless actions risk a direct armed confrontation between NATO and Russia. Our alliance is defensive, but be under no illusion. We stand ready to take all steps necessary to defend NATO's skies and NATO's territory. We are vigilant and we are resolute. And if we need to confront planes that are operating in NATO airspace without permission, then we will do so.
The United States and our allies will defend every inch of NATO territory. Russia must urgently stop such dangerous behavior.
Russia is lying again, as it has been lied before several times. As Russia itself has become a real threat to global peace and security, we need to exercise collectively maximum pressure on Russia. Impunity, appeasement and further concessions would only embolden Putin and would lead to new crimes.
I have only one request to the Russian government. If another missile or aircraft enters our space without permission, deliberately or by mistake, and gets shot down and the wreckage falls on NATO territory, please don't come here to whine about it.
So what's the summary and conclusion today? Well, I wanted to post this video because I think the current political situation that we have globally right now represents the biggest risk of some form of global conflict at any point since World War II, probably even more than the Cold War period back in the 60s, 70s and 80s. And the reason for that is because Russia is continuing to threaten a lot of its neighbouring countries. Countries that were formerly part of the old Soviet Union, and those that potentially could actually be invaded by Russia. Now, that might sound ludicrous, but back in 2021, I actually made a video at the time talking about the fact that Russia was amassing troops on the border of Ukraine. There were lots of tanks that were building up on the borders, and lots of people were saying, what's going on here? Is Russia going to invade Ukraine? And at the time, everybody thought, well, that's ludicrous because world wars and these sort of things don't happen anymore. You don't get a big country like Russia invading one of its neighbours. But obviously, that's exactly what happened in February 2022. So it does sound ludicrous to think about Russia invading Estonia or Lithuania or Poland even. Obviously, it would need to collaborate with Belarus to do some of those things. But it's not within the realms of impossibility. I think there is a chance that it could happen. Now, obviously, the difference with those countries compared with Ukraine is that they're members of NATO, and NATO is an alliance of now 32 countries that have a defense pact. So they will defend the territory of any country that gets invaded or attacked by some form of enemy. So Russia knows this, and I think that's one of the reasons why Russia has held back from taking any form of action against any of those nations, because it would bring the full force of NATO in defense and against Russia. And that's one of the problems that Ukraine has had, that it hasn't been a member of NATO. It wants to join NATO, and that's one of the things that Russia has been trying to stop. But what we've seen over the past few weeks is just Russia starting to invade the airspace of some of these countries. So it started with some drones, and then it's built up to potentially some military aircraft going into Estonia's airspace. And we've also had a lot of instances of problems occurring in airports across Europe over the last couple of weeks. So we've had shutdowns at some of the biggest airports. We saw some drone footage earlier in Denmark. And those sort of things are being linked back to potentially Russia. Now, there's no evidence of that, so we don't know for sure whether that's happening. But there's certainly a lot of noise around at the moment in terms of what's going on and what the potential could be for some sort of action. So I wanted to post this video because whilst this channel is mostly talking about economics and what the implications of various actions are around the world, if we do have some form of military incursion in Europe, it would have a huge impact, because we've got the situation in Ukraine. If another country was to get involved in a similar situation, then that would obviously be devastating for that country. But I think it would be more concerning for global peace. And this comes at a time when the global economy is already slowing down and struggling a little bit in 2025. So I wanted to post this video because I think what's going on is going to cause more countries to have to increase the amount they're spending on defence. That means they'll be diverting some of their budgets to an area that they previously wouldn't have been, maybe 10 years ago. And so they'll have to make choices as to where they see those cutbacks coming from. And this could lead to a further slowdown in the global economy. So the overall summary of today's video is that the speech made by Sergei Lavrov at the United Nations included lots of inflammatory words saying that if anybody attacks Russia, then they will come back with decisive force. We don't know exactly what that means. But Russia is throwing down the gauntlet to NATO at a time when it's Russia who's actually doing all the provocation. So hopefully you've enjoyed today's video, you found it useful, informative and thought-provoking. If you've liked what I've said, then please give me a thumbs up. Thank you for watching this video all the way through to the end, and thank you so much to everyone that's supporting me, particularly all those who moved over to Patreon recently. If you're thinking about moving to Patreon, one of the benefits of it is that you don't get any adverts, so you can watch all my videos advert-free. You'll also get the videos earlier than they're posted on YouTube, and also you'll be able to find any videos that are not allowed on YouTube over there. So hopefully you've enjoyed today's video, and here's something to put a smile on your face.
Mm.